let's go into full screen and let's get into it.
You thought I was done talking about VTuber design. Nope. Think again. Welcome to another installment of waking up in a cold sweat with a topic on my mind and writing a whole video on it in one sitting at 4 a.m.
Yep, that's a
today
mood.
I want to talk about some of the pet peeves I have with VTuber designs and VTuber art. I'm
Okay,
EG,
pop off.
and if you're wondering about my credentials here, I'm a master's student in the fine arts, also a TA at the uni I attend, and among other things I've taught is character design for animation to college students, which is essentially the subject that VTuber design would fall under.
Okay,
Some of the
congratulations.
things I want to discuss, I mentioned briefly in a video about effective design, which you might be interested in and can find up here, but I have some more notes based on common things I see in designs, both indie and corporate. Now, for my same disclaimers before, I know indie VTubers are absolutely working within their means, and it would be supremely unkind of me to voice unsolicited critiques towards them, but on the other hand, corporate VTubers often have little or no control over their designs, and have artists handpicked for their abilities making their art. So I'll be using them as examples of things I think we should be working to improve as artists. I will also pull a couple samples from models submitted to my VTuber design critique forum to discuss some points I see often, and I do want to clarify that all the individuals included did consent to critique too. If you're an artist, these points I'll be sharing may be some things to evaluate your own artwork for, and if you aren't one, they are things to keep an eye out for when commissioning artists. Some of this stuff will be kinda nitpicky, but it's the kind of stuff that I deduct points from my students for, so I feel like it's worth talking about. I try to sort of break these things down into categories, but they're a little loose, so bear with me here. We've got things in the topics of anatomy, or just like the body in general, fashion, and relation to some just like design principles. So first,
and just coming in on it from my perspective as well, as a former animation student, a lot of this is overlap from what I learned during my times studying animation, so it'll be interesting to get her perspective on things, because obviously she's very qualified in what she's doing. She clearly knows her character design, so yeah, I'm interested to see what points she brings up.
First is a category of issues I see more often than I feel like I should, which is just like general anatomical weirdness. Listen, I get it. Anatomy's tough, and I'm not perfect at it either, but there are a couple of rules of thumb and changes I'd like to see in this kind of department. So many models, especially live 2D ones, as well as reference art, have arms that are just like entirely too short. Out of those 150 submissions to my VTuber design critique forum, I'd say at least a third of them are struggling with this. As a human being, your fingertips...
Honestly, it's not something I even noticed. It's not something I even... I imagine when you're dealing with things in the anime form as well, I suppose you can kind of get away with changing the anatomy a bit to make it more cute or small or to fit a certain type of design, but yeah, no, that's not even something I considered or thought about, so yeah, let's see where she goes with it.
Usually reach around halfway down your thigh with your wrist at the level of your crotch, so your VTubers should too. A lot of VTubers are designed in like an A pose, as we'd probably call in like character art, so this might not be entirely obvious, but if we draw a line from the inside of the shoulder to the tip of the fingertips, then rotate it to be vertical, we can test this. Often, it might not even be that the arms are too short, it ends up being that the pelvis is too long, or the crotch is too low in the body, or the opposite, the torso is really short. Having stylistically long or short torso is A-okay, but you may need to adjust other proportions in order for it to not set off the kind of like, something's odd here for your viewers. I'm also not talking about chibi and hyper stylized models here. I get that they usually either have stylistically longer arms or shorter arms, but for your average VTuber who is like 6 or 7 heads tall, this length rule should be followed. Next, semi-related, is having hands and feet that are proportionally just too small for the body. We're all quite stylized as VTubers, so there's a pretty acceptable range for proportions that we'll look at.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
like,
that's
generally accepted face value, and figuring out what the
my
right
point.
size for elements are can take a little trial and error, but it's worth figuring out. Itty-bitty tiny ankles and hands on a curvy model with thick thighs will come across sorta odd, but on a 5 heads tall chibi model will be accepted because chibis being less realistic lends into our suspension of disbelief. This example works because the head is as wide as the shoulders and the rest of the body proportions are kind of small, so they fit in. Alternatively, I'd say this example doesn't work quite as well maybe because the body is almost
I mean, let's have a look. So, with Crony's design, are they too small? I mean, I don't know. It could be the thick clothing as well, is sort of hiding how the body proportions would look. Same with the design on the left as well, where we've got the big thick coat, it covers the arms. So it might look weird, but I'd say they look good. I think both are quite nice designs.
Realistic size you'd expect in relation to being 6 or 7 heads tall, in comparison to the tiny ankles, feet, and thin fingers. Listen, I get it. I have really big, thick hands, but it makes sense for the way that I'm proportioned. It just doesn't work well with my hand tracking because my hand tracker doesn't understand that things collide. So, the closer your design is to having realistic human proportions in the torso and the legs, the more realistic proportions will need to be elsewhere in order for viewers to accept what they're seeing. Next is a note about consistency in the body. Something I commonly see is models with their faces and bodies just like rendered in different styles. I'm talking about models, mainly live 2D ones I see, where the body has a lot of really great detail and shading to give some illusion of a 3D form. Meanwhile, the face is all one flat color.
I mean, surely there's only so much you can do in terms of facial details. Like, I can see what she means with, like, maybe a bit of blush, eyeliner on the characters, maybe, but surely there's not that much you can do with a face, surely.
Aside from maybe a little blush, a tiny shadow near the nose, or one flat shading color under the hair. I especially see a lot of this on models of super buff dudes where their abs and pecs and arms are rendered impeccably, but their faces really have no definition. Now, I know this is likely stemming from the general anime-styled trend of keeping faces super limited, but come on! If we're doing detailed shading, commit! Otherwise, do what animes do for buff characters and match the level of shading of their musculature to the level of their faces. This may also be related to technical difficulties with having to rig more detailed faces in live 2D, but it seems to me like that's a skill that would be quite worthwhile for riggers to practice, right? Stylistic consistency is important in all art, not just VTuber designs, and your face is the most important focal part, I'd argue. So, keeping it consistent with your body, or making it maybe slightly more detailed, would usually be for the better. Moving on, I want to talk briefly about
I'm gonna be completely honest here. There's a little bit too much going on here. Just a little bit. Just a little bit too much going on. I'm sure the model. I'm sure it suits the rest of the model. I'm only seeing the top half here. But yeah, it seems to be a little bit too much.
Slightly more detailed would usually be for the better. Moving on, I want to talk briefly about eyes too. Hyper detailed eyes are very common, and now with the help of programs like Boruto and Vinyan, fancy eye physics are for everyone, 2D or 3D. Mine's pretty cute, right? However, as a result of the way these fancy eyes are usually set up, I see another thing that bugs me a bit and is kind of nitpicky of me to mention: horizontally mirrored irises and highlights. Play pretend with me for a second here. If we shine a light on two spheres from the same angle, the highlights and shadows will be on the same sides, right? Eyeballs are spheres, and although we don't often treat them as such in anime styles, mirroring eye textures and highlights can be a one-way ticket to looking cross-eyed or uncanny. With symmetrical irises or highlights, this isn't an issue, but I rarely see eyes handled that way. Most VTubers are lit in a way that is generally like frontal and top-down, so they can be drawn symmetrically, but unless the light source is right between the character's eyes, like up in here somewhere, the highlights still wouldn't be mirrored. As much as this may add some time and effort in terms of having to draw or model or rig these parts without a symmetry modifier, I promise it's worth it. Please believe me here, I promise. And finally, on the topic of the body, my last and probably largest pet peeve in this category, we gotta talk about skin tones. Specifically, undertones, saturation, and matching it to the rest of the design. Do you remember when those color analysis TikToks were trending that would tell you your color season, or if you're a gold or silver person? We have to think about...
I get the feeling these TikToks were not aimed at me or my demographics, so no, I haven't got a clue what any of this is.
Those things in relation to character design too. Some color palettes will make some skin tones feel washed out, gray, or brassy, and we fully have the power to prevent this. On top of that, it seems like some artists are just color picking skin tones that are already desaturated, all on their own, aside from the way color relationships and the rest of the design may be working, and this is something to keep an eye out for and avoid. For these reasons, I'd also advise against using like gray or black as a shading color, especially for skin.
Oh no, 100%. I agree there. I do agree there.
It can be done well and stylistically, but it's generally tough to achieve a good result with. If you feel strongly about having a specific skin tone in terms of both value and undertone, and when I say value, I mean like darkness or lightness level, you will have to match the rest of your color palette to it in order to avoid the washed out effect or making the skin look like it has like a red or green or yellow or other color cast, just like you probably do in real life with your actual skin tone. Alternatively, if you only feel strongly about the value of the skin tone and not the undertone, you can match the undertone to what fits the rest of your palette the best. Now, if you're a zombie or have a non-human skin tone like purple or blue, this doesn't quite apply the same way to you, but for the rest of us, this can be a really big opportunity for growth. Moving on from my anatomy or body-related points, I have these 3 sort of fashion-related things that bug me. You asked me, some VTuber fashion choices can be detrimental to having an effective design or not. So many VTubers have these sort of generic tech wear or streetwear.
Let's have a look. I think all the designs are quite nice. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying in a hoodie. I am not the pinnacle of fashion, if anyone couldn't tell, but I think all these models look quite good. I think, yeah, I like what they're doing with the fashion.
Wear inspired outfits nowadays, especially indie ones. I have seen so many similar jackets with open collars and probably some belts optionally hanging off the shoulders, often with this sort of plush texture to them.
I mean, yeah, if it's a popular design, I can see how it would start at like a top agency and would filter down to smaller agencies or indies wanting to have similar designs. So yeah, I can see how if one popular person does it, it will slowly make its way down the VTuber list.
I can't even begin to count them all. There's also a lot of really similar formal adjacent suit and dress-esque designs.
I mean, again, I can't see the similarities here. Like, I think they've got Vox and Ow in terms of suits, and I mean, there is only so much you can do with a suit, but I think they are drastically different as well. I mean, also to add, Owie is a girl, and obviously Vox is a male VTuber. With Fauna, and I'm afraid I don't know this the blonde streamer here. Again, I feel like they are fairly different designs. So let's see what's got to say.
Too. I have a feeling some games like Genshin Impact have popularized these sorts of like fantasy formal wear outfits.
Yeah, no,
if
that's
even
fair.
the right thing to call it, and potentially controversial take here. But while I think Genshin characters absolutely succeed in being the waifu or husband bait the way that they're intended and are absolutely attractive designs,
Yeah.
those don't necessarily tell a new viewer much about them and are kind of a missed opportunity in some cases, at least if you ask me or other character designers. Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with these fashion choices, but I really don't think they serve most of us very well as a way to show our viewers what we're about. Unless you're like a tech-themed VTuber, a streetwear model VTuber, or maybe are themed around a sort of professional...
I mean, she kind of has a point, I think. Obviously, Fauna, there's a lot of soft colours in there, so I think that matches her personality as a streamer quite well. With how it is just sort of formal business attire, so I can see how that wouldn't portray the character. Again, I don't know this blonde streamer, so I can't comment on that, but... And Vox, well, I mean, Vox is Vox. There's not really much to say on that, really, is there? So, she might have a point. I'm not too sure.
Unless you're like a tech-themed VTuber, a streetwear model VTuber, or maybe are themed around a sort of professional career like a lawyer or a butler, or, you know, you have some kind of in-universe thing that's maybe similar to the Genshin thing they got going on. I have a feeling you can find fashion choices that'll tell us more about your personality, what you like, and what you do, than those choices would. Do I have a vendetta against these styles? Not at all.
Again, I feel like that's... in its own way, it's its own little electricity. Eccentricity. Like, if you go out in the streets now, a lot of people will be wearing similar shirts or hoodies or jeans. So, I think it makes sense that if something's popular, it's popular for a reason. So if you see a lot of streamers and VTubers wearing similar sort of outfits, I think there's a reason for that. It's because that's what's popular at the moment. So I think her point's valid if you wanted to be a bit more eccentric. But I personally can't see any issues with any VTubers wearing what's popular at that time.
It's It's fun how I have a weird kind of outfit that probably falls into one of these categories right now, but this is why I'm making myself a new one that makes more sense for my character than this one does. This model is just silly and quick so I could get started, and it's about time I upgrade and fix it. Just a little Squeegee 2.0 teaser for you. If you really personally like these styles or dress like it in life, do not let me dissuade you from it, but I just want to say that I've seen a lot of missed opportunities as far as character outfits go, you know? In relation to clothes, I also want to mention over-detailing in them. It's one thing if you're going for a style like Decora that's hallmark is the overwhelming details and colors, but I don't think that's what's happening most of the time when I see this going on in VTuber designs. This is the 4 hairpins, lace, a pattern, gems, bows, stickers, gradients, sparkles, and more, all smashed into one design. You want to be overwhelming to look at without a clear design.
That's fair.
This is something where I recommend picking maybe 1 or 2 or possibly 3 of those elements at most to keep and use, and finding creative ways to incorporate them into the design. This example here is a great example of it. We're using that kind of like spike motif as almost a stand-in for fluffy elements. It's a fun use of a repeating motif that is detailed while not being overwhelming. I also want to bring back my plushification test that I've talked about before. If you can't pare your design down into a so-called marketable plush without heavily removing elements, you may need to rethink what all of the details really doing to benefit.
Honestly, that's an excellent point. That's a really good point that she's making. Obviously, there will be exceptions to the rule if you've got a lot of design, a lot of detail, but yeah, no, that is an excellent point actually. In terms of simplicity of design, I think that's a point well made.
You. Detail should serve a purpose, whether it be to highlight a focal point, tell us about your character, or something else. Detail, for detail's sake, is not helpful, so it might be smart to pare it down. And I mentioned in a previous video that over-detailing can intimidate your fans out of wanting to try and draw you too, and I have a feeling that's not what you want. And finally, the topic of clothes.
I feel I've seen that a lot with Nerissa from Hollow Advent. I've seen a lot of art. I think she's mentioned it herself as well. That her horn, the one on her head, is so detailed that a lot of artists either just simplify it down or just really struggle with it. So yeah, overcomplicated designs can affect the poor artists.
And sort of like the flip side of over-detailing is under-detailing and under-character designing them. What I mean by this is that I also see a lot of outfits that are just normal everyday outfits, which in and of itself isn't bad, but depending on how it's handled, these kinds of outfits can also fall into the category of not telling us anything about your character as well. If you're in a hardcore
I can see that.
punk outfit, that still gives us your vibe and we'll have opportunities for a strong silhouette and more while still being everyday wear, but I see a lot of t-shirt or big sweater and pants or a basic skirt type of designs that don't inherently enhance your character concept. Now, if you aren't intending to be a character and are just making a VTuber design as sort of a stand-in for yourself, I guess that's fine, but I still feel like we could jazz it up a bit more, you know? With infinite money for clothes, I doubt many of us would stick with just like a simple t-shirt or sweater and jeans, and with a
no comment. No comment.
VTuber design, the sky is the limit for what you can wear, so like, don't limit yourself. Moving on from fashion and items within the sort of elements and principles of design category, I have some items here that overlap with things I said in my video on effective VTuber design, but I really want to hammer them home. First is poor contrast, aka that whole white hair or clothes on a super pale complexion problem. I could give you a laundry list of VTubers who have this going on, whether it be into your core.
I can see the point, but it's different enough to me, and obviously Fuawa's design, I think at least, is a very nice design. I think it looks good, so which might bring up more points to this, so let's carry on.
Corporate, and heck, even Victoria Bright Shield and Niji Sanji's New Wave has it going on. More than half the entries for my VTuber design critique series have it too. And you might say, e.g., you have white hair and are kind of pale, you hypocrite. But hang on. The problem with the contrast is that at a distance, all the light-colored things on these types of designs just like blend together.
Do they?
I have enough steps in value and hue between my face and my hair.
Let's just go back for a sec. Did they blend in? They definitely don't with Victoria. As far as I can see, it's still, you can still tell apart the hair from the skin tone. And honestly, with Fuawa as well, I think they're still fairly distinguishable. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Obviously, she has a lot of experience in character design, but From the untrained eye, at least, I think they're different enough.
Lines just like blend together. Mine doesn't. I have enough steps in value and hue between my face and my hair to prevent that. Now, this isn't exclusive to just white against white designs. I also see it commonly in monochromatic and pastel designs too, especially ones where the character has a colorful skin tone that often matches their hair color. So, to test and prevent this issue, we're gonna slap a grayscale filter over your design, or temporarily set the saturation of the image to 0. If there are clear distinctions between things that are supposed to be different colors in grayscale, while ignoring any line art, then you pass. And to note, we're ignoring line art because unless you're super cartoony with thick outlines, line art tends to just kind of fade away at smaller scales or larger distances. Contrast is one of the basic kind of like elements and principles of design that I teach to the 18-year-olds, so I fully understand that it takes some practice to nail, but if they can do it and figure it out, I have a feeling that we all can too, right? Second is these like big blob silhouettes. These usually result from long hair, my classic old foe, the bullet head, and long skirts or capes, but I see so many designs with silhouettes that are not strong enough.
Yeah, no, this is a very valid point, because obviously if I'm looking to my left, I can tell that's Ollie, I can tell that's Bay. On the right hand side, it could just be a hood, it could just be long hair. So I think she's definitely raising an extremely valid point in terms of character design on this one.
Have to be used to identify the character solely based on. Maybe it's just my 3D modeler trauma from having to deal with knee-length hair too, but some of the best silhouette designs I've seen are from VTubers with creative hair shapes like Ollie or Picora or Bales or more. So as pretty as long flowing hair is, try on an atypical hairstyle. Step out of your comfort zone. VTubers love their like 2x4, Dorito, and hourglass bunny shapes, but I'm sure we can expand beyond that using clothing shapes, exaggerating limb shapes and sizes, doing some funky things with your hair, and more. This is a major area we can innovate on, and as a character designer, my eye like twitches a little bit when I see things I want to exaggerate in someone's design because their silhouette would be so good if they did. But enough with the weird blobs. Fill your design in with black, and if you don't have an interesting shape that's identifiable, try changing something up, exaggerating something, cutting your hair, do something. And last, my final pet peeve for VTuber designs that I was thinking about today or tonight, it's kind of related to my point I made earlier on properly handling skin tones, but I have a broader note in color palettes. I see so many that look like they have a gray filter over them. Not like in a way that feels like a stylistic choice, but like in a way that feels washed out. Or maybe related, the shading is just like not dark enough to be lending anything and you end up feeling still kind of like washed out. It could be due to the screen calibration of whoever was drawing it or some other factors like shading with gray. But here, let me show you how to get juicier colors real fast quick for shading so that this stops happening. When you're picking shading colors, don't just go darker, go a little more saturated, and this important one, hue shift too. So much better, see? Decide that all your shadows will hue shift cooler and highlights will hue shift warmer or vice versa.
Good advice.
Bada bing, bada boom. Solved. Case closed. So, after all of that, here's the takeaways. I try my best to keep an objective stance when it comes to character design, but to some degree, personal opinion always creeps in a little anyways.
Of course it does.
And you are welcome to take or leave any of the points I've made here. The only things I feel you should absolutely not be skipping over and considering, though, are my points on anatomy. Everybody always has opportunities for growth and improvement in their art, and that includes me. That's why I'm doing 2.0 with the things that I've...
Yeah. Well, again, when you're dealing with 2D and anime styles, I feel like you can probably take liberty as long as you need a decent foundation to exaggerate. But I don't think there's anything wrong with exaggerating. Like, I mean, if we're just going off anime facial features alone, which obviously a lot of VTubers use, the anatomy is not there. But the knowledge of anatomy is there, but obviously it's extenuated and sort of animeified. So, yeah, a good basis of anatomy I can see being extremely useful when you're designing, but as the be-all and end-all, yeah, sure, okay.
I decided need to be changed. So if you're looking for those kinds of opportunities for that growth, here's some food for thought. And if you are an artist, I once again hope I can encourage you all to appreciate just how much your artists are putting into the work they make for you. And don't be afraid to kindly ask for changes if you see one of the things I mentioned here happening and you aren't thrilled with it. Also, sorry for the 4 a.m. rambling rant, future editing squeegee, who has to make this coherent somehow. Oops, I hope this ends up working out. But anywho, thanks for tuning in. I hope I get some wheels turning for you. And if you'd like my 2 cents on anything else art or VTubing related, let me know in the comments below. And finally, if you heard me mentioning VTuber design critiques throughout the video and want to get in on that, I have a form you can use to enter your design below too. So thank you all for being here, and I'll see you later. Farewell.
Okay. I think that was a really good video. I'll drop that a like there. The creator is Squeegee over here. Yeah, I think she made some completely valid points. Where were we? I think with the hands and the arm length in terms of perception to the body anatomy, I think that's completely valid. It's not something I've ever noticed though. Obviously she's a trained character designer, so I imagine she spots these things quite quickly, but as just a regular VTuber viewer, again, you don't really see that much of the actual body by the end of it. Is normally shoulders high, so I can see why it might be sort of not an afterthought, but maybe just not as much thought goes into it. Well, then again, in terms of the actual body design as well, where was it? That's contrast. Was it here? Like, a lot of these designs have got a lot of detail. I think she was talking about the designs having a lot of detail, yet the face is not. But I can see the point. But again, a lot of the time it is just going to be the face. Like, even with her current design here, it's waist up, so anything below here just ends up just not being seen or hardly utilised, outside of just for your outfit debut or your debut in general. So yeah, I think no, she made a lot of good points. I'm not completely sold when she's talking about the saturations here. Oh, where is it? Is it here? No. I think it'd give me. There we go. Like, I feel like it's different enough not to pay that much attention to it. Like, could it be done better? Potentially, but I feel like, especially with the success, obviously personality comes into it as well, but the success that Fuwamoco have had, is the contrast between hair and skin colour that important? I'd say probably not. Again, a lot of it comes down to personality as well, and obviously Bow Bow, they're very popular as is. So yeah, I'm not too sure on this argument here, but overall, yeah, I think she came across very well. Obviously she's a teacher, so she knows her things. I am just a random bloke on the internet, so honestly I'll take her word over mine on the vast majority of things. I am just a watcher, I'm just a viewer, but I feel like, yeah, it's an awesome video. So if you enjoyed it, the name's here, Squeegee. Give us a subscribe, come follow the video. And if you enjoyed the reaction video, give me a like, give me a subscribe. And yeah, I think that just about covers it for today. So, bye.